A debate has been raging for the last several days about legal immigration in America, and it split the political right, or the America First movement in this country, into two camps: the pro-immigration camp, or the tech right, and the more anti-immigration camp, or the traditional right. Now, the debate has gotten really complicated, really messy, and downright hostile. So my intention in making this video is to provide some analysis, some clarity, and some perspective so that you leave this video feeling more informed, more clear, and also more calm and able to understand the various sides of a debate. So to organize the discussion, I've broken it into 4 different categories. First, there's elite talent. Then there's highly skilled labor. Then there's normal immigrants. And finally, there's a cultural, national, and racial component of the immigration discussion. First, here's how the discussion started. On December 22nd, Trump appointed Sriram Krishnan, a noted technologist who's led teams at Microsoft, Twitter, and is now a general partner at the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, as a senior policy advisor on artificial intelligence. Now, his role has very little to do with immigration. However, he's taken public stances on immigration that sparked a debate. Specifically, he called for removing the country cap on green cards and reforming the H-1B visa system. This sparked a debate about culture and employment in America, and a lot of it fixated on Sriram himself, who is Indian-born, but is a naturalized U.S. citizen. The debate broke down into 2 high-level factions, and before I say this, I want to acknowledge that there's plenty of nuance in the positions of both the people and the factions, and when I say pro-immigration and anti-immigration, I'm not saying that the pro-immigration camp is pro all forms of immigration, and I'm not saying the anti-immigration camp is anti all forms of immigration. Pro-immigration or tech right is represented by people like Sriram, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, David Sachs, Joe Lonsdale. People who are career technologists who have founded companies and are constantly in the dojo of trying to hire engineering talent. On the traditional right, or anti-immigration faction, we have a more amorphous conglomeration of people, but what unites them all is a belief that we need to focus on developing and investing American-born talent and not increasing levels of foreign-born talent that we import into America. First, let's talk about elite talent. And here, Elon Musk clarified that he's referring to the top 0.1% of engineering talent. Their position is as follows. A, there's a shortage of American-born talent that can fulfill elite engineering roles. B, that talent shortage is showing up in specific areas such as AI and machine learning. And these areas are critical to not only our national economic competitiveness on the international scale, but also our national security. And finally, if we do not shore up this talent shortage by importing foreign-born elite talent, we will lose and America will suffer. Traditional right counters that we actually do have that elite talent right here in America, and we are overlooking that talent in favor of foreign-born talent instead. Now, here's some analysis of the claim. It actually might be enough for you that Elon, Joe Lonsdale, and other tech operators are saying that there's a shortage of talent. However, if you don't take that at face value, I want you to consider this. We're talking about the top 0.1% of engineering talent. These are people who could get a job pretty much anywhere, and they're constantly being recruited by top engineering firms who truly need them. Thus, I think it's reasonable to assert that if this talent did exist in America, American companies would stop at nothing to actually find them. And if they can't find them, it's not because they haven't tried, it's because they truly don't exist here. So in summary, supply is simply not meeting demand, and if there was untapped supply, it would have been found already. Now, the traditional right does have a good rejoinder to this argument, which is, well, we need to focus on helping Americans first and cultivating domestic talent so that we don't have to rely on foreign talent as well. And I agree with them. The problem here is one of timing. If it is true that in areas like AI and machine learning, we have a shortage right now, that means it needs to be addressed right now because these are areas that are critical to our national competitiveness. And if we're not competitive as a nation, we're going to all suffer as individuals. I also think it's reasonable for the traditional right to assert that we need to make sure that we're investing primarily in domestic talent. And I totally agree. In fact, I would say that much of a tech right agrees with that as well. And they've said that they actually prefer to hire Americans, and it's a lot less paperwork to do that, in fact. Now, if you don't buy the claim, consider this. It's no secret that on the international scale, America is just not as competitive as it could be when it comes to science and math. Among OECD nations, which are essentially first world nations, America ranks 12th out of 37 in science and 28th out of 37 in math. Simply put, our educational system is not elite at producing elite level talent. But there's also a deeper cultural component here that is sensitive but needs to be addressed. On December 26th, Vivek Ramaswamy made a post saying that, in his opinion, American culture has dwindled into mediocrity when it comes to technological excellence. And it's not inherent to American culture, but it is something that is a present problem. And as a result, a lot of engineering firms would rather actually just employ foreign-born talent. And he points out that this problem starts young. It starts in our media, in our entertainment, where we valorize the position of being a jock or popular rather than doing hard work and being someone who actually likes to build things. And some of the polling actually bears this out. In a recent poll by the Morning Consult in 2023, they found that 54% of Gen Zers declared that if they could be anything, they would be an influencer over a role like an engineer. This doesn't mean that Americans are worse or inferior to foreign-born talent, but it is indicative of a multi-decade trend that has eroded American pride and American excellence, and we can restore that. We've had that in periods like during the space race. And Vivek and I would also argue that we need to revitalize that culture as well as address the educational component so that we're just naturally producing all the American-born talent that we actually need. Now, those arguments are addressing the elite level of talent, but they also have some overlap with the highly skilled tier of talent as well. So let's talk about that tier next. Tech right/pro-immigration camp argues that we need to focus solely on meritocracy if America is truly going to be the best of the best. We also have a domestic talent shortage in key areas. And furthermore, attracting and recruiting the best and the brightest into America has a second order effect of improving innovation in America and actually creating more jobs for all Americans. And there's something to this point. Google, Nvidia, and Intel, which were all founded by immigrants, collectively employ about 333,000 employees alone. If we want to add in Elon companies like SpaceX and Tesla, that number shoots up to 500,000 jobs that are primarily filled by American citizens. Also note that many of these companies have a limit on how many foreign-born workers they can actually import before it becomes a problem for them legally. American companies can't have more than 15% of their workers be on H-1B visas, which is the type of visa that you give highly skilled foreign workers. If they do have more than 15%, there's all sorts of legal limitations that they end up hitting. To counter, the traditional right would make similar arguments to the ones that they made in the case of elite talent. However, in this case, I do think their arguments are stronger than the arguments when applied to the elite level. They argue that we should be focusing on domestic talent first. America is not just about being the best and the brightest, because this is not just a team, this is a home. And perhaps their strongest point is that allowing more foreign labor actually depresses wages for American-born labor, and that the H-1B visa system is actually just being gamed so that tech companies can hire foreign-born workers who are just as talented as American-born workers, but will take lower pay. In fact, a study by the Economic Policy Institute found that 60% of foreign-born workers are making below median levels of pay for the same jobs that American citizens could be taking. Major US tech firms like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have all been found to be importing foreign-born workers and paying them less than the local median wage. Now, in my opinion, fundamentally this comes down to a lack of trust. There's not a trust that what is good for corporate America is necessarily good for all of America. And I think that's a reasonable concern when we look at what globalism did to manufacturing in America. American companies moved many of their manufacturing bases overseas, which devastated blue-collar workers in this country. And it might have helped American companies' bottom line, but it doesn't necessarily help the bottom line of everyday Americans. So they don't buy the second-order effects that the tech right is preaching. That said, it doesn't mean that those second-order effects don't exist. As I mentioned before, many companies in America are founded by immigrants. In fact, 55% of unicorn companies, or companies that are valued over $1 billion, were founded by immigrants. So here's what I think should happen. In order to restore trust, we can't just increase the number of legal immigrants allowed into this country. That needs to happen simultaneously with greater investments in STEM education in the US, as well as overhauling the H-1B visa system so it can't be abused to just allow foreign-born workers to come here and take jobs that American workers could take for higher pay. Long term, that'll create the American talent that we need. In the short term, it'll allow us to fill the roles that we need right now. And to credit Vivek Ramaswamy, he's been saying for at least a year that we do need to reform the H-1B visa system, and Sriram said that too. Now let's talk about the third category, general immigrants, not people who are highly skilled or elite, but are simply wanting to come to America to chase the American dream. Now, this is one of the trickiest categories because here we get into topics like culture, race, and national identity. I think part of what's made this discussion so sensitive and tricky and downright nasty at points is that we don't have a clear idea of what it means to be American, and it touches on sensitive topics like culture, race, and national identity. Part of the difficulty here is that unlike other nations like Italy or India or Mexico, our national identity is not based on race. In fact, it's hard to know what it's based on at all because national pride and national identity has almost become shameful to espouse over the last several decades, and that's been evinced particularly by the woke movement. However, there is something that it means to be American. It's just based on values, not ethnicity. Vivek explains this well in his book, Truths. There are two forms of nationalism. There's the ethnic nationalism that makes people recoil because they associate it with ideas like white nationalism and racism. And there's civic nationalism, commitment to a set of ideals. Civic nationalism is what we need to start making cool in America again. Authentic commitment to values like liberty, opportunity, excellence, pluralism. And by that view, we do have a national identity and we need to be very careful about who we allow in. Because every person that we allow in who is not compatible with that civic identity is disruptive to the American identity that we do have. And even if the people that we're allowing in are ideologically aligned, too much immigration too fast is disruptive, and too much disruption is bad. Now, one of the unfortunate things about this whole discussion is that there's been quite a lot of racism, particularly toward Indians in this discussion. And we don't need to engage with a straw man. We don't need to engage with the ignorant racist. But it's worth pointing out that when a nation feels like its social fabric is being eroded, racial tensions do start to flare up. And that's why it's so important that we're really smart about our immigration strategy and we're bringing people into an abundant environment where there's no scarcity and no reason to pick fights over superficial differences. And what has hopefully become clear over the last several years is there's a bad way to do even legal immigration. For example, we can look at Sweden, where there's high rates of unemployment among foreign immigrants, or England, that recently had a Christmas massacre where a Saudi Arabian man ran over a bunch of Christians as a hate crime. Or Canada, which has a lot of Chinese nationals who are buying up houses that they don't actually use and creating parallel communities within Canada rather than integrating with the existing Canadian identity. So in my opinion, now is a critical time to allow more elite and highly skilled level immigration, but we should not be increasing levels of general legal immigration. That's something we can do once we've gotten our national identity and pride back intact, our mojo back in order, and actually gotten a clear idea of what we're trying to do as a unified country. And yes, skill and being the best and brightest is not the only thing that matters, but it is a high priority right now. And if we do have a strong civic national identity, it's fair to say that there are things that we just don't want from other cultures. And that's not a racist thing to say. For example, many of the people who immigrated here from Venezuela, for example, immigrated here because Venezuela is a failed state with Marxist policies that they wanted to get away from and become part of America rather than making America like where they came from. And on the flip side, there are actually things that we do want in our culture from other countries. Because as Vivek pointed out, in Asian countries, they really do value hard work. And that's something that we need to make attractive again in America. All of that said, when it comes to H-1B visas specifically, we should view this as mercenary talent that we're using in a very short window of time to get America back on track. And the long-term plan is to get American people in American jobs. But zooming out from all of this, despite how hostile the debate has become, I think it's actually a really positive sign that so many people really care about the future of America and have strong, even if they have conflicting views on how we actually make America great again. But in order to identify the winner in the battleground of ideas, it's important that both sides, the tech right, pro-immigration side, and the anti-immigration traditional right, engage with a steel man, not the straw man version of each other's arguments, so that we can all get to the America that we envision.